President, seeing Rabbi. Before I begin, I think we all need to take a moment and spare a thought. The current situation in Eretz Israel, now I would have been okay to even say this before today's news, being the fact that the situation in Eretz Israel is perilous, but with Eretz Israel literally on fire, and the country being extended into an emergency situation, and yet our enemies put out a call this afternoon. Palestinians, Hazikaron, said, those of you inside Israel, as Israel burns, see if you can get your hands on any car, any property, and set fire to it. Because here is an opportune moment. This is a time where Eretz Israel needs our prayers more than ever before. And I would like to address perhaps just one thought, one point. We go from Yom Hazikaron, a moment of such extreme sadness, such extreme challenge, extreme sacrifice. And we go from there into a Yom HaAtzmaut, a day where Eretz Israel celebrates. To date, the Ministry of Defense in Israel put out the numbers since 1860, the year the first Jewish settlers left the secure walls of Jerusalem and ventured outside of their safety and security to build new neighborhoods. Since that day, a total of 25,417 people have lost their lives in defense of Eretz Israel. 5,229 of them, men, women, and children, have been killed in terror attacks. 4,503 civilians killed since the establishment of the state. 79 since last year. 934 civilians killed in the Swords of Iron War, of them 778 on October the 7th massacre. And let's spare a moment and not forget 59 brothers and sisters who are still held in captivity in the horror tunnels of Gaza. I remember a few years ago that wonderful feeling of landing in Ben Gurion Airport, that wonderful experience of waiting 2 hours to rent a car, and then driving up the eerie, quiet highways at the very early hours of the morning. And I loved turning on the Israeli radio. And I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know what the date was. But what struck me was the profound sadness of one interview after the next. Mothers talking about their fallen children. I distinctly remember crying and driving. And I remember the story of one mother who says, it's been X number of years since my son fell in battle. And she said, and to this day, I go into his bedroom every single day, where a picture of him lays on the pillow, where his uniform is laid neatly on the bed. And I speak to my son. And as all of us move on with our lives, we have to think. Those gut-wrenching numbers I read out just a moment ago are whole worlds to people. So I ask the question, how does a country, how does a people go from a Yom HaZikaron? Just a week ago, we stood Yom HaShaar, and then we're supposed to celebrate tonight. How do we do it? So I'd like to just tell you two short anecdotes, two short stories. One of them from my good friend, Rabbi who's a Rav in Canada. We've shared a podium together, fabulous man, brilliant speaker, does tremendous work for Klal Yisrael, but he said a story that really resonated with me. He was leading a group of his congregants from Toronto to a trip in Israel. And something came up during the day, and he said to his people, don't worry, you carry on with the tour. I'll catch up with you later. And a couple of hours later, he found himself running up Har Herzl to meet up with his group. And as he's a little out of breath and a little unkempt and a little sweaty, there he is running up the hill. An elderly couple in somber mood are walking down. And they stop him. This is such an Israeli story. They stop him. Never met before. And this elderly couple, look at this foreign rabbi. And the lady says to him, Slicha Adoni, lama taratz? Why are you running? And then she said to him a line that punched him in the gut. She said to him, Yesh lecha kol hachayim shelcha lefanecha. She said, you've got your whole life ahead of you. Why are you running? And Rabbi Sitner, who's a thinker, thought to himself, why are they talking to me like this? And where must they be coming from? Har Herzl. We know Shlomo Zalman Auerbach used to go there to daven by the graves of the fallen soldiers, the Kedoshim, those who gave up their lives for the luxury to give you and me, that we can go on a plane and go and visit Artzeinu HaKadoshah. Where had they just come from? A grave of a son? A daughter? A grandson? Maybe I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. There's a picture that haunts me. I don't know how well you can see it. It'll be the second time in a week I hold up a picture in front of you. But that's a real picture. For those of you that can't see, it's a young child lying on the grave of his father. And this is his yearly pilgrim to Har Herzl. For these people, it's so raw still. It's so real. Every single one of those gravestones is a whole world. And this elderly lady says to Rabbi Sitner, why are you running? Where are you going? And I think what she was trying to say was there's still a message of hope and inspiration. Don't run through life so quickly that you miss your moment, you miss the ability to live. And perhaps this can answer the transition between such a tragic and challenging time, and it continues to be a challenging and tragic time for the Jews. But yet the Jewish people are still able to stand tall. We're still able to celebrate. Why? Because we don't just remember our loved ones for the purposes of feeling sad. When we reflect on loss, when we reflect on sadness, what we do is we channel it and we resolve to live a better future, to build on a beautiful legacy. We're not turning our backs on the past. We're standing on their shoulders to build a better future. Jewish people have a minhag. When they go to a cemetery, they put a stone on a grave that they prayed at. A stone. In Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh is an even. The word even can also be the beginning of the root of evneh, I'm going to build. We put a stone. We remember the past, but we are resolutely resolved to building a future. As Klal Yisrael comes together to remember the fallen, perhaps the biggest and best celebration ever can be the responsibility with the freedom that we have to resolutely build a fantastic future for Klal Yisrael. More love, more mitzvot, more togetherness. I read a harrowing tale of a soldier on a field who lost his comrades. And he wrote to the remaining members of his platoon, and he says, when we're on the field, Does anybody care what color of kippah there on our friends? Do we care if he was religious or not? Or do we know that we are such brothers that he will lay down his life for me and I will do the same for him? I seldom read notes verbatim when I speak publicly, but I'm going to do that today. I'll leave you with one note that was written by Danny Wise of Ami magazine. He went after October the 7th and he conducted a series of interviews in Eretz Israel, in the Israeli communities of the Gaza envelope. And he toured a certain kibbutz with a woman named Daphna. She was from kibbutz Re'im actually. And during the tour of the kibbutz, she showed him the burnt out, charred remains of what was left. The room in which her mother and her daughter, Shira and Meir, were found dead, murdered together. And then Danny Wise asked her about the synagogues, about the Sifrei Torah. And she answered, no, not a single Bet Knesset was damaged in all of the 21 Gaza kibbutzim. Do you know why, she said? Because none of them had it. And then she wrote the following. They didn't have it. And she wrote the following. Rabbi Shlomo Ranan runs an organization called Ayelet HaShachar, which tries to bring outreach to irreligious kibbutzim. And he came up with the idea of a basketball game between Yeshiva Bachurim and kibbutzniks of Re'im. And the game was set to take place on Chol HaMoed, October the 2nd, just days before the massacre. And Daphna said she led the charge to cancel the game. To her, it wasn't just a friendly match. This was an infiltration of religious Jews into her area. And she said, this is outrageous. I don't need outsiders telling us what a good Jew is. And she showed the texts that she sent to this Rabbi Ranan, warning him not to bring this religious mission to her kibbutz. She said, cancel this game immediately, and if you don't, we'll all block the entrance with our bodies. And in the spirit of peace, Rabbi Ranan cancelled the game. 5 days later, the massacre came, and just over the border in the tunnels of Gaza, this same woman, Daphna, found herself held hostage, face to face with the forces that had torn her world apart. And she said to an older guard in Arabic, she said, why do you torture me? For 20 years, I've made programs for Arabs and Jews. We're your cousins, she writes. And as she pleaded in the darkness for some recognition of their shared humanity, she wasn't met with any empathy at all, cold dismissal. And her recollection is as follows. He spat in her direction and said, you're not a descendant of Ibrahim. You're not a Jew. You're a European colonist who's stolen our land. And it was in that moment, Daphna writes, something broke inside of her. Or perhaps something started to be repaired. She said the accusation hit hard. Like many in the kibbutz movement, I had spent my life defining myself more as Israeli than Jew. More dedicated to reconciling with Arabs and Israelis than healing the divides between groups of Jews. She said, from the depths in the tunnel, being denied her Jewishness by a Hamas fighter, she found herself in crisis and she started to scream, Ana Yahudin, Ana Yahudin. She screamed, I'm a Jew, I'm a Jew. And the guards restrained her, they taped her mouth. And she said, for the first time in my life, I saw my soul. I saw that I'm a Jew. All my life I've been part of this community. We didn't see ourselves as Jews. I saw myself as Israeli, not Jewish. But when he called me a colonist, it hit me. He didn't see me as a Jew because I didn't see myself as a Jew. She paused for a moment, looking at the ruined landscape, and she said, every Arab village has a mosque. Every Christian settlement here builds a church. And here we've got nothing. Nothing to say that we're Jews. And in that moment, she promised herself from the tunnels of Gaza, I promise you, she said, I took upon myself that the very first building when we rebuild this project will be a Bet Knesset project. And she said, when we rebuild our Beit Knesset, will be the most beautiful structure on this entire kibbutz. Story after story tells us about the resolute Nefesh Yehudi, the Neshama of Klal Yisrael. From the depths of the tunnels of Gaza, the Midrash writes that the Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is the Guf. The Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael is the Neshama. We can deal with pain. They put us in the ground. But what they don't realize is that we are seeds of growth. And it's our responsibility as a Jewish community to make sure that that growth perpetuates. Every single thing that we do to strengthen the identity of the Jewish people, to strengthen the Torah growth of the Jewish people. Every single thing we do, that's the victory. And that is the Yom Hazikaron that we can perpetuate. And that's how we can go from a Yom Hazikaron into a day of celebration. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu protect all of Am Yisrael, particularly the soldiers and the hostages. And Be'ezrat Hashem, let these tears not be in vain. We should celebrate Be'ezrat Hashem with the coming of Mashiach. Amen.